It was 30 years ago. A female Tory Prime Minister calling a general election when she didn't need to, while her opponents were struggling in the polls. And it took the media by surprise.
The Panorama programme scheduled for this evening has been postponed to a later date. In its place, we present an election special with David Dimbleby.
Mrs Thatcher has called the election at a moment when her party's well ahead in the polls and when she's confident of a third term as Prime Minister and the opportunity to brand British politics with her mark.
With an opinion poll on the day of this broadcast putting the Tories 18 points ahead, it seemed that their biggest threat could be complacency.
Norman Tebbit made this remark I quoted at the beginning, that if the party stood on its record, set out the opposition policies, there'd be no problem about walking this election.
We assume nothing. We place ourselves, our record and our policy before the judgment of the British people, and we must work every inch of the way with their approval and for their mandate.
Sound familiar so far? Well, keep watching. The Labour Party, dogged by the activities of the far left, had an unpopular leader, so wanted the public to concentrate on policy.
Roy Hattersley, do you think that the voters who've seen in the press the reports of the activities of the extreme left will accept that Labour has the competence to do the things that it's putting forward to the election?
I hope it is. I mean, I hope the election is going to be fought on the rival manifestos, on what we say about ending the housing crisis, on what we say about improving the pensions, on what we say in ending the deterioration of the health service. If the issue is fought on that, if it's fought on a better education system that meets all the needs of all our children, I have absolutely no doubt of the confidence of the electorate and our ultimate victory.
But believe it or not, the Tories raised doubts over whether Labour's policies were affordable.
We shall also direct rather more of our attention to the Labour Party iceberg manifesto, to the bit which shows above water and the enormously larger amount which is below water.
Labour had other problems too. In those days it wasn't just the leader who favoured nuclear disarmament. The whole party did.
Good evening. A double-barrelled attack tonight on Labour's non-nuclear defence policy. From the Defence Secretary, George Younger, came the charge that Mr Kinnock had admitted a Labour Prime Minister would be powerless to prevent the subjugation of Britain by a hostile nuclear power. Speaking in air tonight, Mr Younger said, "I don't know whether Mr Kinnock's fighters would frighten the enemy, but by God, they frighten me." The Prime Minister said the outcome of this election was more important than any since the war, and she issued this appeal to traditional Labour supporters. The extremists have taken over your party, don't let them take over your country.
But as the campaign wore on, the public began to warm to Labour's leader, Neil Kinnock, who slowly started chiselling away at the Tories' lead in the polls.
Mr Tebbit said last week that it was a walkover, this election. You were going to walk away with it. And he said, oh, no, I didn't say that at all. I said, if we can get our record over, we'll walk away with it. Wrong again, Norm. If you get your record over, we're going to walk away with it.
Conservative MPs began to worry, and questions were soon being asked about a Prime Minister previously thought to be impregnable, but relying on the same old clichés.
Yet all of it will vanish unless we preserve the economic strength, the strong defence and spirit of enterprise that have made us prosperous at home and respected throughout the world.
Even more questions were being asked about the management of the Conservatives' lacklustre campaign. As the polls narrowed further, the Conservative campaign went on the offensive, but with just a few days to go, an opinion poll caused outright panic in Tory central office.
A new poll tonight shows Labour catching up fast in Conservative-held marginal seats. The Conservatives have 40%, that's down 2 points on last week. Labour have 39%, up 5.
With just 36 hours to polling, the Conservatives are ahead, but hardly comfortably. Both tonight's polls have the Conservatives ahead at over 40%. Both have Labour in second place, 7% behind in Gallup in tomorrow's Daily Telegraph, and 8% behind in Marplan.
As polling day neared, after all Labour's excitement, it seemed that they weren't going to make it over the line. But the BBC exit poll on election night still offered them some hope.
Our poll forecasts that the Conservatives will be back in Westminster, but that their majority will be cut from its 1983 peak to just 26 in the new House. Remember, there's a margin of error of 2% either way, so it could be that the Tories are back at the end of the night with quite a safe majority. It could be that Mrs Thatcher doesn't actually have a majority in the House of Commons and is a few seats below the 326 that she needs.
In those days, the BBC and ITN had separate polls, and over on ITV there was rather less encouragement for Neil Kinnock.
We forecast Conservative 359 seats, Labour 243, Alliance 24, others 24, so we are forecasting now on the exit poll a Conservative majority of 68.
As it turned out, both polls were wrong, but the BBC's was more wrong, and they knew it after the very first count.
That is an excellent result. By the looks of it, I think we may be finding as the evening goes on we're revising our forecast of the Tory majority upwards.
And that's what they were doing for the next few hours, until finally the result was clear.
This is the state of this election so far. We're forecasting a majority of 104 in the new Parliament.
This year's campaign certainly has many echoes of the election which was held 30 years ago this Sunday. But if Theresa May ends up with a majority of around 100, the similarities really will be remarkable.